And welcome once again to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Glad you're with us. We're here every week meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues. And we have a first-time visitor coming on our show
We
today.
do, and in this political time, we have someone that has already won their statewide race. Dana Murphy, the Oklahoma Corporation Commissioner, was reelected by a huge margin statewide recently, and we're going to have her on, and it is the first time she's been with us.
Never any shortage of issues for corporation commissioners to consider, and these affect our pocketbooks.
Huge jurisdiction, huge responsibility statewide. They have 6-year terms instead of just the typical
I thought Kevin
4-year.
Durant was the only one that got 6 years. So corporation commissioners and basketball players get 6 years, so it works.
What'd Sam Bradford get? I didn't notice.
About that.
In any event, we're going to have Dana on for the first time, and you'll get a chance to see her on The Verdict. You may already know her, but we're real pleased to reintroduce her to you.
It's today on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
We didn't just wake up with this problem. Barrel by barrel, dollar by dollar, we've been exchanging American security for foreign oil. Enough. We're home to a 100-year supply of natural gas, and now we know its potential. Fuel, power, cleaner air. See how natural gas is making a difference at chk.com. Chesapeake, America's champion of natural gas.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
There's no waiting at the St. Anthony ER.
No waiting.
Announcing the end of ER waiting at St. Anthony Hospital. Go to saintsok.com and reserve your time online.
Why didn't we think of that?
And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
We're really pleased today to welcome to The Verdict for the first time newly re-elected Corporation Commissioner, the Honorable Dana Murphy. Dana did her undergraduate work at University of Central Oklahoma and Oklahoma State University in geology, where she graduated with honors. She practiced as a geologist for a number of years, about 10 years. She did her law degree while working as a geologist, working her way through Oklahoma City University, where she also graduated with honors. She was an administrative law judge for the Oklahoma Corporation Commission for 6 years. She has over 20 years experience in the oil and gas industry, and in 2007 she was one of several women named as Outstanding Women in Energy in this state. Recently, she was reelected to her position as a member of the Oklahoma Corporation Commission by an overwhelming margin. I think she's a good bit more relaxed today than if we'd had her on before, although there probably wouldn't have been any reason not to be as relaxed then. But we're glad you're here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and you've studied up on me, I can see that.
Let's talk about your campaign. Obviously pleased with the result. How did the campaign go for you?
Very. I thought it was really an incredible margin of victory compared certainly to when I won in 2008, because I won by 158,779 votes, or that was the total votes. And of the 10 Republican statewide candidates on the ballot next to Dr. Coburn, I had the highest vote total, so that was very exciting.
traveling the state, visiting with potential voters, what issues are you hearing as it pertains to the Corporation Commission job?
I think just in general, I think you hear a lot of concern about utility prices. I think you hear concerns about just overall costs of things, the uncertainty of the economy, jobs. Those are the things I've been hearing a lot as I traveled across the state.
How were you able to do that? I know you are a sitting commissioner, and yet you had to run a statewide campaign at the same time. Were those pretty hard
I'm
things
honestly
to
going to
balance?
tell you, it was very challenging because the first time when I won, it was a very close race, and that was challenging too. But I had my own law practice, and I could kind of work the hours that I wanted. And we're one of the few public bodies in the United States that has open public meetings every single day. So to try to make those and then travel at night, that made it a bit more challenging. And we had two of our biggest utility cases during the last month of the campaign, so that made it even more challenging.
Let's talk about those two cases. What were they concerning?
The two cases involved expansion of the smart meters by OG&E across their customer base. And then the last case that we just heard was the expansion of a wind farm case out in Dewey County, which involves probably $350, $400 million.
Now, the smart technology, that would allow, would that mean that the utility would not need to send someone to the house to read the meter, or is that part of the advantage of having a smart meter?
That would be part of it. I mean, because the move is really going on utilities more to real-time pricing. Because if you think about it, typically when you go to the gasoline pump or you go to the grocery store, you can see what something costs and you know what it is. But your utility bill is simply something you don't see till the end of the month, so you don't know what the charge is or what the cost is.
It's always astonishing. It's always either higher than I expected or lower than I expected. So you're telling me the smart meter might get a little more consistency that reflects my actual usage?
The smart meter is going to give more real-time pricing, so you could maybe move in that direction, so you can see when the cost of electricity is higher and maybe adjust your needs in that direction. Because typically what most people don't realize, peak electricity use, of course, is in the summer, and it's usually from the time period from 1 till about 7 o'clock. So the more you can get people to use their dishwashers and their dryers and things off peak time, that really helps. And then also giving the customer the availability. We're going to have OG&E is going to have a web portal where you can actually go and see and preset your meter, like if you're going to be gone at certain times of the day to adjust your thermostat. So I think there's going to be some really helpful things for customers.
So how is the smart technology going to roll out across the state?
Well, they had actually done a pilot program in Norman of about 40,000 meters, and now this is because they received some federal stimulus money, and there was some timing on the stimulus money about the use of it, to also combine the stimulus money with getting additional an increase from customers to put in the smart meter. So, the challenge for me is I think it's a great thing that we can provide access to customers, but we have to look at privacy issues, we have to look at the cost. There's many things I think that we need to really be looking at, because several other states have had rollouts and have had concerns and issues with customers, and we need to make sure we're looking out at that.
So there are upfront costs that will have to be passed along to the customers?
Right, and it'll be, I think, kind of phased in, and that's the same way with the wind farm case too. As additional turbines come on with the wind farm that OG&E is developing, that'll be phased into the consumer cost. But if you look at it, what's projected is over a 23-year lifespan, it'll actually be a decrease to customers' bills. So there's going to be a slight increase on the wind farms as it goes up, but then as it really kicks in and fully comes into effect, it's supposed to be a decrease because, it'll save on the overall fuel charge because there is no fuel cost for wind.
Let me get a little more elementary with you. You're one of 3 commissioners on what's called in Oklahoma the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. That might lead some viewers to think, they deal with whether a corporation has properly filed its articles of incorporation or not. I know that your jurisdiction goes well beyond, you don't even do that, but you are involved in oil and gas, you're involved in electricity, you're involved in motor carrier matters. What do you tell a resident of Oklahoma when they say, what's the Oklahoma Corporation Commission do?
Well, there's a simple acronym that I use. It's TOPP, TOP, and I use that across the campaign trail and just in speeches I give across Oklahoma. Transportation, oil and gas, petroleum storage tanks, and public utilities. On the transportation side, we regulate about 4,100 at-grade railroad crossings, over 41,000 miles of natural gas pipelines. We're responsible for oversight of about 10,000 trucking companies. On the oil and gas side, it's about 137,000 active oil and gas and injection wells, about 2,900 oil and gas operators. On petroleum storage tanks, about 14,000 above and below ground storage tanks, including about 61,000 gasoline pumps, which we calibrate and look at 2 times a year. And on the public utility side, it's 500 public utilities, including natural gas, electricity, telecom, water, and we always like to throw in cotton gins. So we do all of that in 6 offices with about 427 employees and impact approximately $20 billion just on oil and gas and utilities alone of the state's gross domestic product, or about $150 billion. So it's a very economically powerful agency.
Have the responsibilities of the Corporation Commission evolved? Was this in the original state constitution, or was it created somewhere along the way?
Kent asked a great question, because how did we get that name Corporation Commission? Because the commission was created in 1907, and at one time we did regulate commissions, and thus the name. And if you look at other, some of our neighboring states, there's the Kansas Corporation Commission, which also regulates public utilities, some oil and gas, more similar situated to the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. But our neighbor to the south, their oil and gas commission is the Texas Railroad Commission. So that really doesn't tie in with exactly what they do either.
Well, I know there are oil and gas lawyers, there are utility lawyers, there are motor carrier lawyers, but as a commissioner, you've got to deal with legal issues on all 3 sides. Those are all separate, independent areas that require some specialized knowledge and experience. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think it was very helpful to me to have my background as a geologist and as an attorney, and I served as an administrative law judge there for almost 6 years. But I think the thing you've seen is this area, whether it's energy in some form or another, whether it's oil and gas development or whether it's electricity or natural gas, and that also indirectly involves trucking, you're going to continue to see more complicated issues that are more complex. And I think the one thing that's going to become more of a common denominator is how far the federal government and federal agencies are going to push into regulation of some of these areas, which I think it's more important than ever for states' rights and for state and local regulation by people who live and work and actually know the area.
I think we're about out of time.
Yeah, we are. Let's get to a break and come back. We're visiting with Dana Murphy of the Corporation Commission. We'll be right back.
To be Chickasaw, you have strength, you have faith, and your family comes first.
I was diagnosed with FSGS, which is a progressive kidney disease that leads to kidney failure.
I believe that being Chickasaw makes me strong. It made me a strong mother for Melissa.
She told me that day, don't worry, I'll be there for you. I've got 2 kidneys, you can have 1.
They took me in first, and we just hugged each other, and I said, Melissa, it's almost time, it's gonna be all right.
My mom has given me life twice, and how do you ever thank someone for giving you a second chance? Through those challenging times, my family and I knew that we were gonna get through it, that we are a Chickasaw family, and that whatever obstacle may arise, together we will conquer it.
In Oklahoma, with the technology that's being developed every day, it would be difficult to get much better than it is now, but I anticipate that it will.
Technology is always going to improve. It's always going to get better, and as it does, these fields will give up more and more of their natural resources.
I think with technology and the way they're doing it, it'll be a good, clean, environmental place, and I'm blessed to be here.
The oil and gas industry runs deep in our history and gives us a sense that we have a really strong future ahead of us.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're visiting with Corporation Commissioner Dana Murphy. What are the biggest challenges that the Corporation Commission is dealing with now?
Well, I'd say first, as with every state agency, it's a budget situation. We're all going to have to learn how to do more with less, and we've already been through cuts ourselves with furlough days, not staffing for some of the positions that have come vacant, and that's going to be incredibly challenging. I think the other thing is, again, to make sure that we're doing our best job on local regulation, because you're going to see the continued push I think, by the federal government and federal agencies to regulate oil and gas drilling and development. And then depending on what happens on the environmental side with some of the regulations that might be passed down and how that would also impact our utilities. I think those are among the concerns. And then overall, with making sure in Oklahoma especially that we keep utility prices affordable, but at the same time is reliable. Because it doesn't matter if it's the cheapest. If you flip the light switch and you don't know when it's going to come on or not, do you care if it's the cheapest? No. You want to make sure you actually have the power when you need it.
Well, you mentioned in the first segment about the number of officers and employees you have. Can you tell us where those officers are located?
Right. We have 6 offices across Oklahoma, main office in Oklahoma City. We also have an office in Tulsa. Then we have field offices for our field inspectors on the oil and gas side that are in Ada, Bristow, Kingfisher, and Duncan. And then I mentioned our fuel inspectors who calibrate our gasoline pumps. They do that 2 times a year. They're pretty much mobile out of just their homes or with their trucks. So we have about 427 employees doing all that.
Have you had to cut down on number of employees?
Well, what we actually did is we reduced our workforce about 10%. We had voluntary buyouts, a reduction in force of about 25 employees. We took 8 furlough days, which saved our agency about $100,000 a day. We cut our travel budget in half. And we were already planning on dealing with significant cuts. We're one of those agencies that was really trying to look ahead. So we're already going into fiscal year 2011 with a shortfall, but we don't know yet exactly how that's going to impact us because we won't know the full effect of what benefits we're required to pay for the employees until August. Because I think a lot of people don't realize when the legislature causes raises or increase to state employees, they don't necessarily budget all the money that you need to pay for those benefits. And that's a significant expense.
In the last 10 years, there's been a lot of technology advancements that have affected the natural gas industry. Your view as a geologist and as a corporation commissioner on some of these technologies that are going forward?
Well, we just recently revamped our rules because our rules were basically 20 years out of date with horizontal drilling, and you're seeing the great expansion of horizontal drilling, not just in Oklahoma, but across the nation.
Now, what's the advantage
plays.
of horizontal drilling? Why would the industry want horizontal drilling?
Horizontal drilling allows greater exposure to a long length of rock, which typically allows you to have a greater ability to produce. But with that, there's a additional. It's a significantly greater cost typically to drill horizontal wells. And if you look at technology, you're talking about being able to guide and direct boreholes for almost 2 miles or in excess of 2 miles within millimeters and centimeters. So there's an incredible accuracy there. But with that, brings the challenges as well of dealing with landowner rights. We've heard a lot of talk about hydraulic fracturing, and some things are now at the forefront of things in the media that 2 years ago we had never even discussed those.
And the industry is working in parts of the country where they're not typically worked in. Don't you think that's part of the issue that's going on?
I think that's exactly right, Mick. I think a big part of what has happened, especially up in Pennsylvania, where you're seeing a lot of residential areas where this has happened, and in Oklahoma, we're so much more used to drilling and development, but typically vertical wells, and a lot of times out in rural parts of the state. But as you move more into higher, populated areas, these challenges are going to continue to be out there, and I think it's more important to us than ever to make sure we're doing what we need to do with the staff that we need to, so we don't wind up with a one-size-fits-all federal regulation on oil and gas drilling and development. That would really hurt the industry.
And I would think your background as a geologist would help you understand a lot of these types of technology.
It really does. I felt like I helped lead the charge in revamping our horizontal rules, and we had a whole bunch of meetings. In fact, I took 4 town hall meetings across the state in different parts to talk to the public and the media about horizontal drilling, and we had videos trying to help people understand it, and I think that's part of our responsibility.
What kind of reception did you get at those statewide meetings?
It wasn't like some of the town hall meetings on Obamacare or health care. These were very well received. We had people that were pretty knowledgeable. A lot of mineral owners in Oklahoma are pretty sophisticated owners, and they had real questions about, how do I know if the meter's on my land, it's not taking my gas even though the borehole is next to me? That's the question we probably get a lot. And to actually show them a demonstration of how things look and what's done, I think that helped a lot.
Let me ask a question, and I'm just boiling it down to 3 major areas. That's oil and gas, utility, and the motor carrier. About how much of your time, personally, as work time, do you spend on oil and gas as opposed to utility as opposed to motor carrier?
I would say that most of the work the Commission does as far as the cases that come in front of us probably involve oil and gas and probably involve utilities. And then on the motor carrier front, some, but what most people don't realize is money out of the Petroleum Indemnity Fund, which is what's used for cleanup of underground storage tank sites. $500,000 of that money every month goes to the Oklahoma Department of Transportation to put in weigh stations, and those are supposed to be put across the state, because if we're going to go to all the expense of developing and building better highways, we need to make sure that we're watching for trucks. So overweight trucks are one of the, the most intensive things on roads and bridges. So there's an intermix and intermingling there of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation and the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. So that's going to be a big issue now and in the future.
As the state continues to look into passenger rail, both in local communities and the idea of high-speed rail, in some sort of futuristic tense, will the Corporation Commissioner come in and deal with the railroads, or will that be the Department of Transportation's job?
I think that would be predominantly the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, because really mainly what we're tasked with at the Oklahoma Corporation Commission is the safety of at-grade railroad crossings, and there's about 4,100 of those, so just making sure those go through a lot of cities and municipalities, so that's important. So I would see anything that we had to do with that more of an indirect, not such a direct impact.
And there's talk about trying to restrict the railroads from using their loud whistles in the middle of the night as they go through metropolitan areas. Is that something that you would be dealing with? Because those are typically at-grade crossings.
That might be something that we are involved with, but again, to a pretty limited extent. But again, as that more things come up, it's amazing the things that the Commission probably worked on 5 years ago, and you look at now how much more involved we are on the oil and gas side and utility side and different things. I think it's kind of an evolving process.
You hear from time to time discussion about term limits. And of course, Corporation Commission is a statewide race,
right,
or statewide office. With a 6-year term. I guess it's the longest statewide office, longest term of any statewide office. And there's no term limit, I take it, on being a member of the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. What do you think would be appropriate, if anything, in regard to term limits for the Oklahoma Corporation Commission?
Well, that the statewide term limit question is actually on the ballot this year for all statewide offices, including the Corporation Commission. And most people don't realize the commission was created under the Constitution, and that's why it's a little bit different commission. I think the challenge there is, if I looked at the fundamental requirements for being a corporation commissioner, and I've already talked to you about all the things we deal with, the only requirements are to be 30 years old, be a resident or citizen of Oklahoma for 2 years, and be a registered voter. And those are the people making decisions on oil and gas and utilities and all these other very, economically challenging situations. So I think if you're going to look at term limits, maybe you need to think about looking at what the requirements are. And I think the other challenge is, although it wouldn't be so much with the Corporation Commission, if you look at these other statewide offices, do we really want 8 new statewide officials every 8 years? And what kind of background should we require for those folks? So I mentioned to people a lot, there's 2 sides to look at term limits.
And with 3 commissioners, are you subject to open meetings rules and those aspects? Can commissioners talk outside of the open forum?
Actually, that's a very good question, Mick, because we are under very strict open meetings requirements for all utility cases that are posted as legislative. We cannot talk among each other about those. Now, cases that are deemed judicial, which might be oil and gas, it's possible to do that, because what most people don't realize is the Commission is a very peculiar agency, because we have, some administrative authority, legislative authority. It's kind of a quasi-legislative, quasi-judicial, quasi-executive administrative, and there's a lot of different nuances to the agency.
All right. Dana Murphy, Corporation Commissioner of the State of Oklahoma, thanks so much for coming on The Verdict.
I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kent and I'll be back with a final word when we return.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
The
good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. The state of Oklahoma is served by 3 corporation commissioners, all Republicans: Bob Anthony, Jeff Cloud, and Dana Murphy. First time we've had her on the show before. She is a wealth of information.
Well, indeed, and they just do a grand job out there at the Corporation Commission. You don't always agree with their decisions, but that's the way it goes. But what you always feel like when you've left the Corporation Commission, so I'm told, and so my personal experience has been, that you always feel like you've been treated fairly, and they listened and they considered what you had to say.
All right. Dana Murphy, today's guest on The Verdict. And let me tell you about how you can get involved in future guests about The Verdict. It's easy to do. You go to our website, theverdict.tv, you log on and you tell us about a guest or a topic that you'd like to see Kent and I discuss or visit about on an upcoming edition of The Verdict. So,
and we'll respond to you.
Of course we will. And the address again, theverdict.tv. Head there and tell us about a show you'd like to see. That's going to do it for today's show. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We want to thank Corporation Commissioner Dana Murphy for coming on, and we thank you for watching. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.